Well, I also want to welcome you to church today. I know you've already been welcomed, but it is a great day to be in church. And so we've got friends, and if you don't know it, we're one church in multiple locations, and we've got people coming to church today from all kinds of places. I want to welcome our friends at our Riverside campus there in Bremo Bluff. We're so glad that you're at church with us today. Our friends in Aylett and Farmville, our folks in Midlothian and online from all kinds of places. We have 2 campuses in a prison. We're glad you guys are here today, and our folks in Powhatan from all over. You could be doing anything else, but you decided to come to church today. That's an honor to God. It's certainly an honor to us, and our hope is that you find this to be a valuable investment of your time. I know you've also heard about and celebrated 21 Days of Prayer. I just want to say for me, 21 Days of Prayer was life-giving in a way that I did not expect. And so if you haven't been able to or weren't able to participate in 21 days, you just need to know it'll come back and you'll get a chance again. It really did something amazing inside of those of us who were part of it and for our church. And so we kicked off our year in a way we've never kicked it off before with that 3-week series called Pray First, 21 Days of Prayer. Today, we launch a new series that is designed to collide the true teachings of the Bible with where we live our lives today. See, we design series at our church in 2 different ways. Sometimes we gather and we focus our time on who God is. We're just trying to focus directly on Him so that we can recognize Him, we can hear His voice, we can know what He wants us to do, and put spiritual practices into place in our lives. That's what Pray First was like. Now, all of that from the teachings of the Bible. But other times we design series and the starting place is a little bit different. The starting place is then we focus on who God wants us to be. So the starting place is really where we are. We start where we are and we dig into God's perspective on where we are and our circumstances. Again, all from the teachings of the Bible. So this series that we launched today, it's from the latter kind. It's the latter kind. We're starting with where we are and trying to figure out how does God want us to live our lives in these areas. And it will be life-changing for everyone here if you will lean in. All right, I'll come back to that in a second. In 2004, NBC launched a new reality TV show that quickly became a major hit. Maybe you saw it. It was called The Biggest Loser, or at least maybe an episode of it. And the idea, you probably know the idea, but I'll say it for someone who doesn't. The idea was that people who were dangerously obese and desperately needed to become more healthy, they signed up to participate, and they were challenged to lose weight in this contest with other people to see who could be the biggest loser. And there were doctors, and there were fitness gurus, and there were nutritionists, but there were also some cruel exercises and some tactics that were really that brought a lot of criticism to the show. In fact, so much so that in 2016, among this growing amount of pressure, NBC canceled the show. And it was later picked up by another network. But in the aftermath of what NBC did, there were a lot of books written about it, and some of the show's winners from the years launched fitness empires. They became uber wealthy. The star fitness trainers from the show went on apology tours for the stuff that happened. And there was this ongoing tracking of the contestants to see, what happened after the show was over. Did they keep the weight off or did they gain it back? And some did and others didn't. But the show had a ton of controversy to it. And I'm not here to assess it. It's not my lane. I don't know enough about the nuances of healthy weight loss to, talk about it in any helpful way. But what I do know is that for 11 seasons, at least 8 million people a week tuned in to watch this show. 8 million viewers, many of whom were living vicariously through those contestants, knowing that they themselves, the viewers, also needed to make a change. And they were desperate to find just the right formula for it. I brought you a formula today, no kidding. I have the formula that you're looking for. Not necessarily for becoming physically healthy, although it will apply in that area too, but for life change in any area. From finances to marriage to parenting to time management, even to your pursuit of who God is or wanting to be more who God wants you to be. For you to experience real, lasting change, it requires an all-in commitment in that area of your life that you're seeking to change. Rick Warren, a famous pastor who many of us have followed through the years, he once said this: you become what you're committed to. You become what you're committed to. And I think he's right. My life has proven out that he's right. And that's what this series is about. Regardless of how you feel about the tactics of The Biggest Loser, again, I'm not here to say whether it was good or not good, but those people from the show who had the most dramatic changes and never looked back, the ones who maintained their new identity and their new physique for years, even after their moment in the spotlight, the secret to their success can be found solely in their commitment to it. They went all in, not for a short stint, but for the long haul. And look, I know it's complicated. Seriously, I know that there are factors like metabolism and genetics and family history at play, and I'm not trying to debate all of that. Still, the most successful over the arc of time were the most committed to it. Commitment was the key, because you become what you're committed to. Not just in physical health, but in any important area of your life. It's not helpful for you to blame your financial situation on your circumstances or inflation or your boss. I know those things are factors, but the lack of commitment to financial discipline is how many of us developed a problem, and an all-in commitment can and will turn that problem around. We're going to show you 1 week of this series how that works, because God has given us the tools if we just will be committed to using them. And your chaotic life being pulled in 1,000 different directions and feeling like you don't own your own calendar, it's not really your kid's fault. It's not your spouse's fault or your parents' fault or your school's fault or your employer's fault. There is a way for you to tame the beast that is your out-of-control schedule. We're going to show you the way. God has given us the tools. We just have to be committed to using them. So every week of this series, we're going to use the timeless teachings of the Bible to show you what you need to do to shed the weight of anxiety surrounding these heavy burdens. I can give you the tools, but only you can commit to using them. But I promise you this: if you'll go all in, God will meet you where you are. He will give you what He designed and desperately wants for you. An amazing, exciting life that will fulfill you instead of wearing you out and wearing you down. So we're going to get to today's commitment in just a second. But first, I thought, maybe over the whole series, you would allow me to pray with you and for you. Would you just pray with me right now? God, we're here today. We came to church carrying all kinds of things. Some of us had arguments on the way in, or stuff didn't work right this morning. And we all have something that's on our mind for later today. We got stuff to do and things that weigh us down. And yet we're here, God. And so we're asking for your help. Would you help us clear our minds just long enough to hear your voice for a few minutes? Because your voice, God, is the only one that matters. And we're here seeking it now. Help us hear you. Amen. 34 years and 22 days ago this day, I spoke words of commitment to a girl in a white dress and me in a tux. My dad was standing right there to my left, and her mom was sitting right there crying. I like to think crying tears of joy, but I'm still not so sure. Our families and friends were sitting in the pews watching it happen. Those words: I, Brian, take you, Susan, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. We were 19. 19. It's like we were born 5 seconds earlier. We were legal adults barely for a year, and somehow we were speaking words of commitment that would take us till death do us part. How could we possibly have any idea what it would mean or how to achieve it? We were kids. We were in love with no concept of what worse would look like, or sickness. We were college students. I was borrowing money on student loans with no concept of what paying it back would do. They were just throwing it at me. It felt like free money. I didn't even have to pay a payment for years. So I just kept piling it on. I had the idea of poorer was incomprehensible to me. In fact, I misunderstood in those very early moments of my marriage, I misunderstood, like many people do, the key wedding text. It's a text used in most maybe weddings, including the ones that I do. I always use this text. It comes from Jesus' own words, and he quotes the earliest parts of the Bible in Genesis, and this is what he says. Haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no one separate. So for years, I mistakenly assumed that God did all the work, because after all, it said what God has joined together, God's in the joining business. I'm just the beneficiary of it all, right? If my marriage is great, God got it right. If my marriage is a mess, God didn't get it right. Either way, I'm just a bystander. I'm a spectator. I'm a passive participant at best. What I missed for a long time was this last piece. Let no one separate. Let no one separate. And this is the part that tells me that there's really more than just God at work here. I think about it like this. Years ago, many years ago, I got a crack in the shower of our bathroom. I just stepped in just the wrong way in just the right spot, and the thing popped, and there was like a 1-inch crack. And so I did what any real man would do. I ignored it and pretended like it didn't exist. And then I worried about it, so I duct taped it. Because I thought that solved all problems in the world. And then the duct tape got funky in a hurry, so I ripped that off and I super glued it. That didn't work either. And finally, reluctantly, like a guy asking for directions, I finally had to stop and ask a friend for help. And he told me that there was this thing called an epoxy resin kit. I'd never heard of one before. And this is like a 2-part liquid process. Part A is the resin and part B is the hardener. And when you put these things together and you mix them, an actual chemical reaction takes place that causes them to fasten together and create like this super strong fusion. Well, that's really what this text implies. It turns out that the resin God uses to join a husband and a wife, the two becoming one flesh, is strengthened or weakened by those same two people. More specifically, by their mutual commitment, not just to staying married. Hear me, this is not just about being married, but their commitment to an enriching, vibrant, healthy, dynamic, adventurous, exciting, faithful marriage. If you don't have both sides of this epoxy resin combination, then the union is weak and the fusion is compromised. But when God does his part, and when you do your part, the results are mind-blowing. And the marriage is incredibly life-giving. As I often say, there's nothing as great as marriage when marriage is working right. But to get there, you need to realize that great marriage equals an all-in commitment to it. Not just marriage. You can have that with a legal document. I mean great marriage. In order to get this, you gotta have that. You can't have great marriage without an all-in commitment to great marriage. So I'm gonna walk you through a few aspects of what that commitment practically looks like. But before I do, I wanna make a note for all the non-married people here. Today, roughly half of the adults in the United States are married, 133 million people, give or take a couple, which means that the other half is not. But here's the thing. Most of them will be. The data is strong about this. Most of them will be. People are getting married later, that's for sure. They're waiting longer, but they are still tying the knot, which means that this message is for you too. My friend Tanner, one of the pastors here on our staff, he told me once that when he was single and he was growing up here, he was a teenager here and kind of grew up here. And he said, when I would teach on marriage, he said, instead of checking out and assuming that it wasn't for him because he was single, he said, I just kept leaning in. I knew that one day I would need those tools. He would need the tools I was offering at some point in his life. He knew it. So if you're single, follow Tanner's example, because what I'm about to give you will become really important to you in the future if it's not important to you today. Haven't you read that in the beginning, the Creator made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. What does it mean to lean into unity, to pursue oneness, to be fully committed to a great marriage? Today, I want to give you 5 factors, each encompassed in a single word. And if you will employ these concepts, and if you'll lean into the all-in commitment of them, you will find great marriage, or at least the first starts of it. The first thing we have to do is we have to serve. We have to serve. The Apostle Paul famously wrote two sections of the Bible we call the household codes. And in it, he goes through the list of, this is how you should behave if you're in this role or this role or this role. One is in the book of Colossians in the Bible. The other is in the book of Ephesians. I'm going to read you the one from Ephesians, or at least a piece of it. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The idea is that we submit to each other. We serve each other. Not just when it's convenient or when serving your spouse aligns with your own preference. Anybody can do that. When Paul says, husbands, love your wives just like Jesus loved the church and gave himself up for her, he's not talking about sacrifice instead of satisfaction. He's talking about sacrifice as a means of satisfaction. It's a fascinating analogy that Paul uses, comparing the need for a husband's love for his wife with Jesus' love for his church. Because in the Bible, love is not a feeling. You and I treat it like it's a feeling, like it comes and goes. But in the Bible, love is always action. So Jesus loved his people. That's what the church is, by the way. It's not a place. It's not a building or a time on the calendar. But the people who are followers of Jesus. So Jesus loved the church, his people, so much that he set aside his own preference for a pain-free life, and he willingly chose torturous death. When he did that, he laid himself down for his bride, the church, in a way that elevated her need and sacrificed his. Are you hearing me? It elevated her need and sacrificed his. And what Paul is saying is, this is how you should treat your wife. What he's really saying, and if you take this all together, what he's really saying is, this is how you should treat each other. Submit to each other. Love each other with sacrificial action. How? Not just when you feel like it. Anybody can do that. You serve each other, especially when you don't feel like it. Every time you don't feel like it. And you know what happens when you start serving your spouse repeatedly over time? You just build that muscle memory, you start doing it. What happens inside of you is the selfish voice gets smaller. And the desire to serve, that craving just grows. Little things. It can be big things and little things. It should be all of the things. I don't have a garage. So when we park our cars, we have to park them in the driveway. And there's a spot closest to the door of our home, and there's a spot farther away. One of the ways I serve her is making sure she always gets the premium spot. Always. On cold mornings, I used to find out what time she was leaving, and if I was going to be home, if I didn't have to leave before her, I would go out and I would start her car 10 minutes before she had to leave so that it would warm up for her. I said used to because for decades, for pretty much the whole of our marriage, we've been driving junk cars. I mean, just whatever I could find that would get us from point A to point B. Now, I always make sure, even then, that she had the better of our two cars, but that won't say much, because both those cars were high mileage and they looked like it. They looked the part. But this past Christmas, after secretly saving for a good long while, I surprised her. I pulled up in the driveway with a really nice car, complete with had the red bow on it, the whole deal. And now I don't have to go out and start her car in the cold. She can do it from the app on her phone. And it was a super cool moment. And Susan's a little bit of a hard read, so I'm looking at her. I'm trying to think, wow, she seems like she likes it, but she's really not over the top about it. So later in the day on Christmas, I said, hey, when did you know about this? She said, I knew about it the day you bought it months ago. I knew about it when you first started thinking about it. That's what I knew. She's just smarter than me in addition to all the other things. Here's the point I want to make. I still drive an older, high mileage car, and that's just okay. Compared to the car I drive, she's driving a Ferrari. And I wouldn't have it any other way. She'll always drive the nicer car. And I never think, when am I going to get a turn at the top of this pyramid? When's it my turn? Never. Because you know what the answer to that question is? Never. I want to serve her. I don't want my turn. I want her to have a turn. The other day, it's like 5 degrees outside. You remember that cold thing? And it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I don't know if anybody here is spiritual enough to know this, but Jesus goes to bed like 9:30. So it's like 10 o'clock at night. I got one eye closed, the other eye is, half on the way. And she says, I hear her say out loud, she's really not talking to me. She just sort of she just realizes it. So she says out loud, oh man, I forgot to get my gym bag out of the car. And so I jump out of bed, I throw on a hat, I slip into a pair of slippers, I slice through the Arctic air, and I retrieve the block of ice that is now her gym bag. She didn't ask me to do that. She was getting ready to go get it herself, but my job is to serve her. In fact, a few years ago, I changed the ringtone on my phone. Forgive me if you already know this. So my phone's in silent mode. I always cut it off before church, but I left it on today for this reason. So Susan's gonna send me a text. I want you to hear the ringtone for. Now you can find that ringtone, but don't you dare, because I think I own it. I call that, it's not called this in your ringtone list, I call that the Queen's horn. And when I heard it, I thought it conveyed just the right message to my mind. At first, it was funny, like we laughed for a little while. And then something happened. It kind of triggered an auto response. When I hear the Queen's horn, everything else is less important to me. The Queen's horn overrides my silent mode. It overrides everything. It doesn't just demand my attention, it deserves my attention. Why? Because I made her a promise that serving her would be my priority, that I would submit to her out of my allegiance to Jesus, that I would love her like Jesus loved his own church and laid down his life for her. And what really makes this work, what the real secret to it, is that Susan treats me the same way. Now, I would serve her even if she didn't, but it would be a lot harder, I admit that. The real secret to serving is when a husband and a wife are on the same page about this. They're each serving each other. They're each putting the other's needs above their own. And when that happens, everybody's needs get met, and the fight is no longer about you gaining territory, but about you giving it away. Commitment in marriage is commitment to serving. You've got to serve. Second thing you have to do is you've got to celebrate. Susan and I have worked together for a long time, pretty much for the whole of our marriage, except for maybe the first year or two. We've literally worked together. Not every couple can do this without one of them figuring out how to off the other one. Okay? I get it. It's especially hard. There's some dynamics you have to navigate when you work together. So at home, Susan is the queen. We talk about this. She likes the title. I like giving her the title. She's the queen. By the way, that doesn't make me the king. It makes me like the queen's pauper or I don't know what. But she's the sovereign, right? She's the queen. But when we're working together and we're on a team, we're not functioning like a couple. And it's a dynamic that you really got to figure out, or it brings a ton of tension. Like I said, not everybody can do this. I find that most people can't figure this out. So a few years ago, Susan was tasked with, as part of her job, she was in this role for a while where she was trying to raise the excellence factor in our church, just to make our church better. And that necessarily had her viewing everything we do with a critical eye, including me, especially me. And so finally, this goes on for a while. She's just doing her job. Finally, one day I sat down with her and I said, hey, people take shots at me all the time. I mean, everybody wants to tell me what I can do better. Everybody thinks they know how to do my job. They have lots of suggestions for how I can improve. And I do want that. I want that from you. But more than that, what I really need from you is I need you to be my biggest fan. That's what I really need. And from that day on, that's exactly what she became. Not that she never offers me something constructive, because I need that and I want that from her too, but she became foremost my cheerleader. She became the encourager. She celebrated wins with me. She believed the best. She helps me achieve it. So let me just ask you this question. It's purely rhetorical. You shouldn't say anything out loud. You can talk about this later. How are you celebrating each other? How are you cheering each other on? How are you encouraging each other? Because if you weigh this thing out and you put it on a scale and criticism and negative talk outweigh positivity and encouragement and cheering each other on, then your marriage will never achieve greatness. You've got to celebrate, and it's got to be bigger than the other stuff. You got to serve, you got to celebrate, and you have to listen. James, the brother of Jesus, famously said, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. See, most people don't listen well. Most people just think they listen well. Because you think listening is simply being quiet while the other person is talking. It's simply being quiet while the other person is talking. That's not listening. Real listening is listening with the eyes as much as it does with the ears. Real listening is a quest to find the intersection between the words that person is saying out loud and the feelings that they're trying to express in here. I can't tell you how many times when I do this well that someone would be talking, I'd be listening, and I would speak just a handful of words, like one sentence, in response to what the other person was saying. And as I did that, I would simply reflect whatever they were feeling as best as I could understand it. And when I do this, I can't tell you how many times I've literally watched them release this anxiety or their fear or their anger simply because they felt heard, simply because they felt like somebody understood them. So look, instead of telling your spouse what they should do, instead of telling them what you would do, instead of telling them what your dad once did, instead of evaluating them by telling them that they shouldn't feel bad or they shouldn't cry or they shouldn't be angry, instead of thinking about your rebuttal or your advice or your need to talk, try listening for feelings and just naming them. Put yourself in her shoes or his shoes and try to feel what they feel and just give it air to breathe. Just give voice to it. Susan was telling me one time about this conversation she had had with somebody that really frustrated her. And she got a little amped up. Susan doesn't usually get amped up. I'm usually the, frantic one and the whatever. Susan usually is sort of even-keeled. And so she was telling me about this. I could see her getting kind of upset. And I was formulating solutions while she's talking, right? I got a whole list of, well, you could. Or have you thought about, or well, if I were you, I would. And I didn't say any of those things. I was smiling and nodding, but I was totally checked out. And when I caught myself thinking those thoughts, I quickly just drove that mess out of my mind. And I really tried to listen for her feelings. Now, what she was expressing was frustration and anger, but I thought the feeling was something else. And so finally I said, that person really hurt you, didn't they? And what she was saying with her words was frustration and anger was really the pain of hurt feelings. And I was never gonna find that while I was formulating all that mess in my mind. I was never gonna find that by giving her advice. In fact, lecturing cannot coexist with listening. You can do one or the other, but you can't do both at the same time. Stephen Covey once said that empathetic listening is the greatest form of caring that you can give to another human being. So in our marriage, we use a bit of code language. I'm a fan of code language. And so sometimes it'll go like this. We'll say, and this is exactly how it happens pretty much every time. One of us will say, I feel like you're not listening to me. Notice that I'm smiling. Oh, we always say it with a smile. I feel like you're not listening to me. No yelling, no angry tone, none of that mess. So I feel like you're not listening to me. And the other will always responds, you're right. You're right. I'm really sorry. I want to understand how you feel. I'm listening now. Help me know what's going on inside of you. That's how it goes almost every time. You become what you're committed to. So for all the folks who are thinking, there's bound to be somebody here thinking, well, I'm just not a good listener. My dad wasn't a good listener. His dad wasn't a good listener. I was born this way. It's not my fault. Stephen Covey also once said, argue for your weakness and it will be yours. Don't argue for your weakness. You become what you're committed to. You can be a good listener. In fact, listening is a key to a great marriage. So 2 more really quickly. Serve, celebrate, listen, then you have to laugh. Now, I don't want you to raise your hand. I don't want you to say anything out loud. Don't elbow your spouse or give them that eye. You know the eye. I just want you to think. Just think. When was the last time the two of you laughed together with each other? When was the last time you had fun together? Now, I know lots of couples, you got this part right. I also know lots of couples that don't. But there are people here today who are thinking, man, it's been a long time. Or even if it's just been a while, but it's been some time. Can I just tell you that laughter and fun, it's a key component in a great marriage. I want you to remember back to when you got your first job. Maybe it's the job you still have, or maybe it was just a long time ago. And remember, right, the interview was super exciting and they painted this picture of all this productive work and this environment and this team spirit and this high impact role you were gonna play. You were gonna make a difference. And you went to that job and the first week was amazing and the first month was amazing and maybe the first year was amazing. But then somewhere along the way, all that excitement faded and work just became work. That's what has happened to marriage for many of us. What started with the dreamy bliss and the honeymoon became the drudgery of raising kids and paying bills and fixing the leaky roof and changing the oil and cutting the grass and visiting the in-laws and the laughter and the fun. It's never the squeaky wheel. So it took a back seat and then it just fell off the radar altogether. At first, marriage was all fun and then it wasn't fun at all. And I get it. I really do. We raised 3 kids. We bought a house. We worked hard. We did all the things. I know the mayhem of it all. But we realized the truth of this proverb, which says a cheerful heart makes you healthy. And it doesn't just apply to individuals. It applies to marriages too. So we decided consciously that laughter and fun would be embedded in the formula of our marriage. And we didn't have much to work with earlier because, kids will suck every last dollar you have. So we did a bunch of low-cost stuff so we could break the routine and bring some fun along the way. And as our kids grew, and they grew up and they moved out and we got our lives back, and for those of you with little kids, you're gonna get your life back, I promise you. Now we get to do more things. Time became our friend again, at least for a little while. But regardless of your situation or your budget, along the way, we decided to be intentional about laughter and about fun. And you can do that too. You should do that too. So serve, celebrate, listen, laugh, and finally learn. I think most people treat marriage like it's a Ph.D. A doctorate, in case you don't know, a doctorate, they call that a terminal degree because there aren't any more degrees you can get in that field after you get your doctorate. I know I have one. They consider you an expert now. You're the teacher, you're no longer the student. Listen, marriage is not a Ph.D. It's more like a ticket to lifelong learning because life changes us every single day, a little bit. And experiences change us. And as we get older, time changes us. If we're not learning, our marriage gets stagnant because we never figure it all out. It's a moving target. We're all still growing, right? So I like to say that I want to get up every morning and go to the University of Susan. She's the professor, I'm the student. I want to know more about you. I want to know how life changed you yesterday. Early in our marriage, we started a learning regimen about marriage. We read books about marriage. We read all the books about marriage. Some we agree with and others we don't, but that's not the point. The point is to learn together in the context of a growing, committed marriage. And so we're reading, sometimes we read a book out loud together, and sometimes we each buy a copy and we'll read a chapter and talk about it or whatever. So we're reading a book together, and I'll say out loud something like, is that true? I mean, this author, she says that women think so-and-so. Is that true? Do you think that? And she'll say, I've been trying to tell you that. And I'll say, well, you didn't say it like this. And it happens the other way too. So we study marriage. And we listen also to great communicators and great authors and people we trust and respect. And every year for decades, we have either gone to or led a marriage retreat. Shameless plug here. There is a marriage retreat coming in less than 2 weeks at our church. If you're married, if you're engaged, if you hope to be married one day, let me reiterate, you become what you're committed to. Marriage retreats have been a critical component for us. We believe that it can be life-giving for you too. You don't have to be in trouble. Great marriages do stuff like this. So sign up and come. Susan and I are going to lead the one this year. We're really excited about it. Healthy marriages invest in their marriages this way. So come with us, and we'll have some laughter, and we'll have some fun, and we'll learn together. This marriage, this relationship, nice. Our marriage is the most important human relationship in our lives. It's the way that God made it. It's the way He intended it to be. Everything that I am, any success that I have achieved in my life has a direct connection to the success of our marriage. And that success is a function and a product of our commitment, our all-in commitment to it. And we want that for you too. So wherever you are, especially if you're married now, today can be the beginning of a brand new season for you. The truth is, great marriage is a really great adventure. God invented it, and then He entrusted it to us as husbands and as wives, as future husbands and future wives. If we will steward this gift well, we'll find that we become what we're committed to when we're committed to great marriage. So would you let me pray for you now? God, thank you for inventing marriage. And we just recognize today, God, that there are many folks here who maybe have not yet achieved great marriage. And I pray, Lord, we pray that this might have inspired them, that they might begin to invest in their marriage in a way that leads to greatness. That's what you want. It's what they want. So God, give them the courage to pursue it. Thank you for what you're doing in our homes and our families. And help us honor you with our marriages, we pray. In the name of Jesus, amen.
You can have a great marriage with all-in commitment. So we want to invite you to take this card and consider which of these things are doing well. And if you're online with us, you can download this card at the link in the chat or on our website. So put a check mark beside what you're doing well, circle what you want to do better, and then talk with your partner about it. Hope you come back next week for another message on commitment. We'll see you then.
And the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through to make those rainbows in my mind when I think of you sometime, and I want to spend some time with you, just the two of us. We can make it if we try, just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
Just the two of us, building castles in the sky. Just the two of us, you and I. We look for love, no time for tears. Wasted water's all that is, and it don't make no flowers grow. Good things might come to those who wait, but not for those who wait too late. We gotta go for all we know. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
Just the two of us. Building them castles in the sky. Just the two of us. You and I. I hear the crystal raindrops fall on the window down the hall, and it becomes the morning dew. And darling, when the morning comes and I see the morning sun, I want to be the one with you. Just the